Tycho is an American ambient music project based in San Francisco. The project was started by then graphic designer Scott Hansen. What started off as a part-time solo project has now evolved into a multiple-time Grammy-nominated band. Having not picked up an instrument until the age of 21, Hansen started making music as a hobby in the background while he progressed his career as a professional graphic designer under the name ISO50. In 2002, Hansen created the project after releasing his first music with a 4-track EP titled The Science of Patterns. Heavily influenced by Boards of Canada, Hansen said, "I think it showed me there was another way of looking at electronic music." This pushed him to making an album in a similar style with his own spin on it. In 2004, he would release his first LP, Sunrise Projector, under the Gamophone label. It was then re-released in 2006 under the now defunct Merc Records label, now under the title Past His Prologue. The re-release contained a lot of changes in tracks which can now be seen on screen. Still relatively unknown, Tycho would start to gain exposure in 2007 when he signed to the Ghostly International label. As through Ghostly's partnership with Adult Swim, Tycho's music would be used in a lot of broadcasts and featured on compilations like Ghostly Swim. In 2010, Tycho would morph into a band with new members Zach Brown, Joe Davidsons, and Rory O'Connor. Doing this for live purposes, Hansen said, "I didn't feel comfortable with it and the way I was representing the music. It wasn't something I would have enjoyed myself. I would have wanted to see how it was made." Around this time in 2010, Hansen decided to really focus on music for a year, citing, "I just decided that this is the time. I might never get the chance again to really focus on music, where that is all I do. I pretty much dropped everything on the design side for that year to finish the album." That album in question was Dive. Released on November 8, 2011, the album saw immediate success, going to number 22 on the US Top Dance/Electronic Albums Billboard. The album contains 10 tracks, some notable ones being A Walk, Dive, Hours, Coastal Break, and Melanine. Described as being a more refined version of Past His Prologue with more dynamic and multi-dimensional soundscapes, Hansen himself described the album as the full picture of what he was trying to achieve with Past His Prologue. When creating a track, Hansen began writing all but one of them on a guitar, as opposed to digital equipment. This was because I made more mistakes, and that characterized the process more than anything, experimentation and mistake. And that's what is interesting, because in a way the songs kind of create themselves, and you're there more to witness it. Hansen also created the album's cover art by using his skills from himself being a graphic designer by trade. He would also do most of Tycho's future album covers and artwork, later saying Tycho had become more of an audio-visual project for him. In 2012, Tycho released Dive Deluxe version. This version would contain remixes of Dive remixed by Memory House, Adrift remixed by Shigeto, Dive Again remixed by Keith Shelley in Athens, A Walk by Colombo, and Ascension by Rob Garza of Thievery Corporation. Dive is still one of Tycho's best and most popular albums to date, with the album having 133 million streams on Spotify alone. The track A Walk being one of his most popular, with 36 million streams on Spotify as of this recording. On April 22nd, 2013, Tycho, along with previously mentioned Rob Garza of Thievery Corporation, released a 4-track EP titled Fragments and Ascension. The EP had 2 tracks that had already been released, with Fragments coming from Thievery Corporation's Culture of Fear album, and Ascension coming from Tycho's Dive album. The other 2 tracks are remixes, where Hansen remixed Rob Garza's Fragments, and Rob Garza remixed Hansen's Ascension. This would be Tycho's first EP since Science of Patterns, and his last one for another 7 years. Released on March 18, 2014, this record saw Tycho further sharpen and refine his signature sound, which he credits mostly to Zach Brown, saying, "The difference between Dive and Awake had everything to do with Zach coming in and saying, 'Listen man, there's 20 things going on here, let's focus on 2 really good things.' I learned a lot through that." This album dabbled in post-rock and strayed a touch from the usual down-tempo and chill wave that had encompassed past his prologue. Something which Hansen said Tycho wouldn't be doing much more of, saying, "Wake was as far into the rock world as I'll go." The creative process for this album was a lot of firsts for Hansen. This was the first album where he worked with someone right from the jump. And unlike past his prologue and Dive, it wasn't drawn out and created over a long period. After Dive, Hansen had some things cobbled together for Awake, saying, "I definitely felt like there were some good starting points, but they were pretty minimal ones." So Hansen, along with Zach Brown, went up to a cabin on Lake Tahoe and wrote the whole thing out in a few weeks. Some notable tracks on the album include Awake, Montana, Hell, and Plains. When asked about influences behind the names of tracks, Hansen said, "I tried to keep them concise and I tried to remove any loaded meaning. I don't want there to be anything where I'm forcing some perspective on people. I want them to build their own meaning." Awake proved hugely popular, peaking at number 23 on Billboard's Top 200 Albums chart. The title track being maybe his most popular, pulling in millions of views on YouTube and having 60 million streams on Spotify. Dive and Awake combined also managed to pull in 200,000 plus album sales. Cap off 2014, Tycho did a tour around the US and Canada. However, Awake-related activity would not finish until 2016 with Awake remixes, and then Awake Deluxe version being released later the same year. Leading up to the release of their 4th album, Epoch, the group released 2 singles, Division and Epoch. The album was released suddenly, with no notice, on the 30th of September 2016. When asked why he did this, Hansen said, "I've grown tired of the typical release schedule, where you turn in a record and wait 4 more months for people to hear it. There's a disconnect between artist and listener. I wanted a more direct connection to the experience for everyone, for the music to be fresh in our heads when people heard it for the first time." This album concluded the trilogy that was started with Dive and now finished with Epoch. Continuing to refine his sound, having taken everything he'd learned from Dive and Awake, Hansen now felt like he had the album that he'd envisioned Dive to be. Hansen said he returned to a lot of concepts that drove his work prior to Awake, such as direct connection between emotion and output, instead of pondering ideas and concepts for a while. The idea of the work being a multi-layered tapestry, but with components a little more separated than he did in Dive. Unlike previous albums, the album title's choice was very deliberate. Hansen said for him it was a closing of an era for him as an artist, the trilogy, and a lot of ideas that drove it coming to an end. Epoch brought Tycho to new heights, going to 78 on the US Billboard 200 and going number 1 on the US Top Dance/Electronic Album. It also brought the project's first Grammy nomination, being nominated for Best Dance/Electronic Album for the 54th Grammys. 2019 Epoch would conclude with the release of Epoch Deluxe version, which contained various remixes. After 2 years of relatively low activity in 2017/18, where Tycho would only release the singles Jetty and Sea featuring Brooklyn-based band Beacon, Tycho would start off 2019 with a flourish, releasing 2 singles, the first being Easy on the 17th of April 2019, and the second being Pink and Blue on May 14th. Pink and Blue would indicate that Tycho was trending in a new direction, featuring vocals from Hannah Cottrell, or Saint Sinner. On that same day of May 14th, Tycho announced the release of a new album. Said album would be Weather, due to be released on July 12th. This album was dramatically different to all of Tycho's previous works, with 2/3 of the album being spearheaded by vocals from previously mentioned Saint Sinner. In a YouTube video on the making of Weather, Hansen said he wanted to reconnect with his original inspirations of what got him into music. He said that Past His Prologue was originally conceived as a vocal record, with him recording vocals, but he didn't think he had the necessary skills to implement them effectively. With him considerably more skilled, and having achieved what he wanted Dive, Awake and Epoch to be, he wanted to return to the idea of a vocal record, saying, "To me that was the ultimate challenge, because it's so different, Hansen searched around, looking for a vocalist for the record, working with a few different people. Then Saint Sinner popped up through a mutual friend. She was looking for someone to mentor and guide her career. They gravitated towards each other, and she became the voice of the record. Hansen had a lot of praise for her, and when talking about what she brought to the table, he said, "For me, this record in particular was all about reconnecting with things that inspired me really early in my career. To see someone in that moment, I think, helped me kind of channel that version of myself in a lot of ways." They really put Hansen's skills to the forefront, showed how much he had developed as an artist and as an electronic music giant. For their efforts, Tycho received their second Grammy nomination, again in the Best Dance/Electronic Album category, and as usual, they capped off Weather with a worldwide tour. Released on February 28th of this year, Simulcast was an instrumental reworking of Weather. This made it a lot more comparable to Tycho's previous works before Weather, with Weather's lyrics being switched with instrumental soundscapes. This gave the album a more abstract element than Weather. And speaking on the relationship between Simulcast and Weather, Hansen said, "I see the albums as two paths to the same place. With these two albums, I wanted to present the same idea in two languages, one more literal and the other more open to interpretation. I wanted to show how a single core concept can evolve into two completely different things. It proves how powerful the process is in shaping the song." Over the past 5 years, Tycho has been on a complete roll, showing no signs of slowing down. However, with many countries going into lockdown weeks after Simulcast's release, and in the middle of its tour, this poses many challenges to Hansen and the project. Speaking on this, he said, "Obviously music is small in comparison to what is happening to a lot of people, but even a lot of high-profile artists are in a tight spot right now. Some of them just released albums and were out touring them, which costs a lot of money, depending on who you are and what you're trying to do when this all happened. There are all these costs associated with starting a tour, which you hope to recoup as a result of it. And when that gets shut down, you're screwed. This situation has the potential to destroy a lot of careers. Even with a lot of the Simulcast tour being cancelled, I still think Tycho has an incredibly bright future, and I look forward to watching the project grow even more in the coming year." If you found this video interesting, I highly recommend you go and listen to Tycho.